Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone out there today. Yeah, it's been a hot minute since I've been on here. I think I was trying to remember the last time I did a second breakfast, and I think it's been a couple of weeks. So it's like, oh no. But all good reasons, and we just sometimes have to decide what we're going to do in the moments of what we're given, and how we're going to steward those moments. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. I know it's kind of been an intense week, and to be honest, the Lord, um, what we're going to talk about today, the Lord gave me the title, "The Sword and the Sickle." I don't know, probably several weeks ago, and it's just kind of been on me, and as just kind of been having these conversations with the Lord, what he's wanting to say. Hey Linda, what he's wanting to say in this hour, in this moment of time. And as I've been just kind of conversing with him, and having these conversations, I really have kind of just been unplugged from everything that's going on in the world. I don't like outside influence of anything coming in when I'm trying to hear something. In this week, and I'm just as this week has unfolded, I'm like, well, that's your perfect timing, Lord, on talking about this very thing. And just the weight that I have been feeling is just very, very intense. As you all know, I just kind of I feel a lot of stuff, and and so it's that thing. And what I really kind of felt like I needed to say was, there's going to be a lot of victories that we have in the spirit and here on this earth. But some of them may not quite feel victorious, um, not in the way that we expected it to feel victorious. Um, but we also, we're all called to carry a sword, and we're all called to carry a sickle. And what we need to do is every moment as we are journeying here on this earth and with people, we need to make sure that we're using our sword and our sickle properly. Our sword is for battle, it's for war, but that war is fought in the spirit. Hey, Robin, good to see you. Our sword is for battle and for war in the spirit, right? Our sickle is for harvest here on this earth. And many, have been confusing their sickle and their sword, or vice versa. And I think what needs to be said is that we need to know um, when we are to war and when we are to gather. Hey, Robin, good to see you, Mama. Um, and part of that is knowing the times, it's knowing the seasons, and it's discerning what we need to do in every situation. Hey, Lila, love. Um, you know, and when we do that, we stop using our sword here on this earth. And I've seen a lot of confusion in that, in the conversations that have been happening this week. Like I said, this whole unfolding over this last week has kind of been not a surprise, because I mean, I knew this was something that was going on. I'm not that unplugged from social stuff, but I just kind of felt like it really fell into God's perfect timing of what he's wanting to say to us, to his church, to his bride, to his remnant, whatever word, terminology, title you want to use. It's what he's calling us into in this moment. And right now It's discerning very closely and understanding very clearly the times and the seasons that we are in, and how we are warring with our sword, and how we're gathering harvest with our sickle. And I just think that we've been so quick to celebrate this victory, but there's a part of me that has, yes, I've been celebrating because, you know, uh, all life I'm pro for, all life, and it's the expanse that covers. And, some people, not all of us, are called to stand in a very specific field, that this particular week unfolding has been. This particular week is a very specific field of being pro life. And I think some have been in that field, not holding their sickle, but holding a sword. And it's left, yeah, it is a little V, Linda. It's a great one. I'm not diminishing that in any stretch of the means. Um, but I think some of the sword swinging, I think a lot of it's ignorance and unintentional. Okay, I'm not being judgy. I'm not judge and I'm not jury. Um, but I think it has crossed the boundary lines of that specific field, and it has cut the stalks in another one in a very harmful way. Hey, Tiff. Um, Again, I'm not saying this as judge and jury. I'm just saying what I've been seeing. Um, and I think we need to take a temperature of a broader picture, um, so that we look at all life and how things are affected. Um, I think this very pivotal moment of time is very important. Um, and we absolutely need to rejoice in that. Um, but I think we need to look at the broader picture of, in this victory. Um, I said it yesterday on Lisa's broadcast, I think, um, is what we've been seeing kind of unfold this week, is a higher court handing down to the lower courts, um, more room to rule, reign, and put things into place. When you take that and you transfer that into things of the spirit, I think it is a very clear, um, marching orders, that God is giving us, His church, His bride, to carry out. The higher court is handing over more responsibility to us, to step into this pivotal moment, take more responsibility, to do more things, to basically, in a sense, step up to the plate where the sleeping church has not been in a very long time. Um, you've heard me say this before. The church, the ecclesia, was always commissioned to be a voice of solution and resolution, not division. And I think if we're going to celebrate in this particular moment of time of this, victory, we also need to come to the table, with solutions, and adjustments, and be the problem solvers, because it's a much bigger picture than just this one thing. And I think we all agree to that. So, how do we go about doing that? Because we cannot be silent any longer. We weren't silent. The intercessors were not silent for 50 years. And this victory, in my opinion, really belongs to them. Um, yeah, I mean, that is definitely a part of it. I just think we, biblically speaking, need to be the solution. And when we begin to model what that solution is in every facet, we're all called to different fields, right? We're all called to different mountains, whatever analogy you want to use. We are all called to a place that's very strategic for this set moment of time in order to be a solution, and a voice of reason and a voice of compassion, arms to hold on to people, provision, help, you name it. There, I mean, you all see the bigger picture here. And in order to be life, across the board, right? We speak life. I mean, that's my tattoo. It says "speak life," but the life has a capital L, and I did that on purpose. you know, and we need to stop kind of running our mouths, more than what we're putting our hands and our feet to. And so I think when we do that, when we take a step back and we ask the Lord, okay, Lord, you have me in this specific um, region, right? In this geographic location, you've set me around these types of people. You've given me kind of a hot button for this particular group of people, or for this injustice, or for this. Are you called to the government mountain, so to speak? Are you called to families? Well, what does that look like for you in your specific field? And when you find that, you begin to see the value of that. And that kind of is where the Lord has had me over the last several weeks, as He's been talking to me about how His church, His bride, His remnant, again, whatever title you want to put on that, is how we have all been carrying our sword and our sickle. Either we've laid them down, or we're using them improperly, or we're not using them at all. I mean, we've all had our seasons, where we could probably fall into all of those categories, right? And He landed me in 2 Samuel chapter 23. And this particular chapter, the first several, groups of verses, it's going through this list. And it's titled in my Bible as David's Mighty Men. And I love this because, I mean, I love finding these characters in the Bible that really only have a couple of verses about them. I call them the underdog stories, right? Like nobody really knows much about these people in the Bible, but they were significant enough to be written about. They were significant enough, that people took notice. And I've talked about one particular one that's in the same chapter. His name's Benaiah. He was one of David's mighty men. He took out this Philistine with his own spear, all this stuff. And but the one that the Lord landed me in is in verse 11 and 12 of chapter 23 of 2 Samuel. And it says, next to him was Shammah, son of Agi the Hararite. When the Philistines banded together at a place where there was a field full of lentils, Israel's troops fled from them. But Shammah took his stand in the middle of the field. He defended it and struck the Philistines down, and the Lord brought about a great victory. And I began to just picture this story, and I've had this conversation about this particular person in the Bible, about Shammah, with a friend of mine. She had this beautiful revelation over Shammah. Yes, Kimmy, I'm talking about you. Um, you know, this beautiful revelation over Shammah. And over the years, as she and I have, in different seasons, we've had the same conversation about Shammah, and the Lord has continually brought up fresh revelation about these two little verses over this one man that stood in this lentil field. And it just, in this particular hour, in this season, I began to kind of ask the Lord, it's been this, I think we've all kind of been in this journey of like, Lord, what field am I standing in? Right? What field are you calling me into to stand in? And when we find that, we then begin to see the value of it. And then we begin to go, you know what? I'm going to stand in this field on my own, right? All my help just fled the scene, right? This is Shammah. Everybody, the Israeli troops just fled. And there was Shammah saying, no, this is a field I see value in. This is a field I'm going to defend. I may be struck down dead in this field because it is only me, and I'm coming up against a whole troop of Philistine army men. I mean, the Philistines were giants, remember? They were, yeah. And so I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about how many of us have stood in fields in the past and in the current where it's felt like you're ill-equipped and it's felt like you're on your own, and you have an army of giants coming up against you. I think the current stuff going on in this earth can feel and look a lot like that we are standing in this one particular field, probably isn't very big. Lentils probably weren't of high value back in those days, but Shammah saw the value of that land, and he saw the value of that harvest. And I think sometimes we don't see the value of the field that we're standing in the current, because we're dreaming of a field in the future. And I think we forget to see the value, and we don't defend it the way we should. I think sometimes we look for significance and relevance in that field instead of just the value of what will grow out of it. And in that sense, maybe we put our sickle down when we should be holding it. Um, I think about this battle that Shammah had, how much fear he must have felt standing in that field alone, seeing this army of giants come up and surround him. How he struck them all down and gained victory is only a God testimony, right? Only God brought him victory. Only God could have done this. Only God could have made this happen. And I think we can see this over big things that happen in the earth here. Maybe big things that maybe just happened, or big things that happen in our life. But I think even in that victory, at some point, Shammah had to set his sword down too, and I just think that there has been some confusion in how we walk and how we defend these fields that the Lord has called us to. And I haven't said much. I know I've said some stuff through social media, but I haven't said much, and I haven't said much because I have a very diverse group of friends that I connect with on social media. And when I say I'm pro life, I'm pro all life. And I I feel very protective of everybody that I'm connected to. They're my field. And I talked about this yesterday on Lisa's broadcast. My prayers have been, I have a lot of buttons that can be pushed, call them triggers, whatever. But things that get pushed that I'm passionate about. This particular week, it's definitely something that I'm passionate about. But my prayer has been, let that button that gets pushed, that is, maybe labeled, injustice or justice or whatever you want to label it, may my response not be a quick trigger, but a slow response, a slow, thought out response, because I don't want my response to be that of a sword, but one of a sickle. And the thing with the sickle, I mean, we all know what it is. It's that curved blade that you sweep the wheat with, that cuts down that wheat. But I see it as a gathering tool, and not just a cutting down, right? I see it as a gathering tool, and I want to make sure, and I want to challenge all of us, that maybe while we're here on this earth, we use our sickle a lot more than we do our sword. Um, that we step out of a place of judge and jury and into a place of being a witness. And I don't think that we can really show the love of God if we're using our sword here on this earth. Our sword was meant for things of the spirit. That's it. That is all that sword is supposed to be used for, is things in the spirit. And we have used it so violently and so frequently here on this earth that it has left the church in a perspective of being violent, intolerant, judgy people. I think it was Emma Stark I heard say it's being beautifully intolerant, right? Because sin is sin. Sin is sin. It's sin. It's sin, right? There's no measurement. There's no weight. It's just sin. Murder is just as weighty as a lie, in my opinion, and in the opinion of God, right? Um, but what I think Emma really means by being beautifully intolerant is kind of where I feel my heart and my spirit is to be like Jesus. Jesus, he didn't sit with sinners to affirm them in their sin. He sat with them to build relationship and to love them out of that sin. Okay. And I think, at least in the church culture that I grew up in, it was one of those things where, don't go into the leper's camp because you'll catch leprosy. Okay. Don't go there. They'll drag you down. And there's some wisdom to that. So don't hear me like make this broad sweep and all of that. But Jesus spent more time with people in the world than he did with the church folk, right? Even though, in my opinion, he saw what the church folks were doing is more egregious than what he saw the people of the earth doing. Right? He even said it from the cross. Forgive them. They know not what they do. And being someone that has come out of the church and then into the world and come out of the world and back into the church, I can tell you I understand both sides of that. And I think my justice button gets pushed more as I see things within the church, the injustice button as I see things in the church. And I had this conversation with somebody yesterday, and I said, I've been guilty of this more than I would like to admit, but I've had a lot of conversations with people out in the world, and I've had this desperate cry and this heartbreak that I've had because I didn't have a church that I wanted to encourage them to go to. And I didn't encourage them to go to a church because I wanted to protect them from the church. And I wanted to make sure that they just had this encounter with Jesus with just me, because I'm not saying this is right, okay? But this was my mindset back then. I didn't want the church causing more harm to that person. And like I said, I don't know that that's a right mentality, but that was a mentality that I had when I was having a lot of these conversations with people. And it got brought up in a conversation yesterday, and it reiterated, this whole word, that the Lord's been talking to me about. I'm like, man, but I think it is a picture of what it was. And I think there are still habitual rituals that are still being done even now. I don't think it's as much or as egregious as it was before, but it's still there, where it feels like some of the churches that just want to go back to business as usual, they don't want to leave their church building. Those aren't the safe places to send what you're reaping, right? If you're out in the world, and you're reaping and you're gathering, we need a safe place to bring, right? And I think they're becoming more and more safe places. So please don't hear that as judgment. I'm just saying that there's this pivotal moment that we've been given, and I believe this pivotal moment is a place of redemption for the church. Because right now there's a lot of nastiness being said out there, and it's because the church has not been beautifully intolerant. They've just been intolerant and ugly about it. They haven't journeyed, they've judged. Again, this is just a sweeping statement, and people will fall in varying degrees of that based on their experiences. Um, and I think a big part of that is because the church has been using the swords on each other too. Um, and been that courtroom instead of the hospital. I know you've heard me say that a lot. Um, but I think we're in this moment of time where we have to step back just a little bit and ask God how he wants us to step into this pivotal moment, how he wants to use us to redeem the time that's been lost, to redeem the actions or inactions, I should say, of the corporate church over the last half a century plus. I do believe that he is going to use us to redeem that. But we have to pull up our big girl pants, our big boy pants, and step into a place of what is going to be very uncomfortable. We are going to have to be okay with being uncomfortable in this moment of time. If we really, truly want to be used by God to enact change, to be a governing voice, to be a voice of reason, to be a solution to the problems of this earth. See, the earth and those that reside in it are looking to us to either mess up big, which is the perspective right now, or to actually step up to the plate and put our actions where our mouth has been. Are we really going to be the feet and the hands and the heartbeat of Jesus? Or are we just going to remain silent or intolerant as usual? I think there is a lot to be said about this. Are we going to step into the fields where most don't see value? We need to see value in that field, and we need to stand there and we need to war for it, because there is a beautiful harvest that is coming up. And I think we need to really see the value of it. I think that's been a big problem. We have not seen the value, because what value we have placed in things is not what God has set us in. We've been putting value in being relevant. We have valued being important. We have valued being known. We have valued being seen. We have valued having this quippy thing that goes viral. We have valued things that are not of any value when it comes to the kingdom of heaven. We have looked at our lentil fields and go, you know what, that's not worth much. I'm just going to bypass that. Where in fact, the lentils were used in so many things, right? Wheat can only be used for certain things. Lentils can be used for a lot more. I'm not going to go into all that because I forget a lot of it, but I heard a teaching one time that talked about it. But we have to stop weighing and measuring value based on earthly standards. And I think that we have been the most guilty of that when we were supposed to be standing out of that. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're supposed to have a different standard, a different value system. You know, what the earth casts aside and throws away, we see the gold in that and we pick it up and we're like, no, you are worth more than others have treated you, right? The dispossessed, the lost, the weary, the broken, the widowed, the orphan. That's what our whole Bible is about. That's who Jesus went to. He detoured to go encounter, to be an encounter for the woman at the well. She was the town reject, right? She went to gather water at the time that nobody else went. She went in the heat of the day, the hottest part of the day when no one would be around to get her water. Well, that's when Jesus showed up. And I can't step outside of this right now. It is, I just feel like this is that pivotal moment. And I was just talking with my friend Kimmy this morning. We've had this scripture, and of course, I can't remember the address of it, but the scripture that says, many are called, few are chosen. I think there's been so much religious abuse and misuse of that scripture. And I apologize if I'm taking this out of context with this revelation, but this is where it's at right now. I believe the difference between, we are all called, okay? I believe the few chosen, it's really the difference between being obedient and not. We all want to be the few chosen, right? But I believe that God is choosing all of us, but he's inviting us because he gave us that free will. He's inviting us to step into a place of obedience. He's inviting us to step into a place of sacrifice. And I believe that those who are willing to sacrifice, to step into a place of uncomfortable obedience, that's how you become chosen. Because we then begin to say things like what Paul said, to live is Christ, to die is gain, right? Where we've, like the last one, I said, we've built so many altars with our words, but no sacrifice. We've done and we've said so many religious habitual rituals, but we've done nothing with them. They're just structures that we've, come into an agreement for a feel good moment. And then we've walked away and left them there. And God's sitting there going, wait a minute, I thought we were going to talk about this. I thought we were going to do this, And then we wonder why we're left in the dust of disappointment, of unanswered prayers, unfulfilled things, feeling like we're trapped in a space of time that we know we're not supposed to be trapped in, where it's this dissatisfactory Groundhog Day feeling, right? Where you're just on repeat and you're like, why am I stuck here? I don't understand why I'm stuck here. Well, because you said to God, hey, I want you to come in. Yeah, I'll do that. But then you don't do it because it's going to cost you your comfort. It's going to force you to step out of your comfort zone. It's going to force you to sacrifice time, attention. It might cost you, sacrificial giving of finances, time, intercession. Sometimes he's going to ask us to do something and we just don't feel like it. That's me sometimes when he's asking me to do a broadcast. I don't feel like it. But I already told him I would be obedient in what he asked me to do. And so it's going to cost me my comfort. And I know this is just a minuscule example in the grand scheme of things. Because what I do in this set moment of time has no bearing on what I'm called to do outside of this time. I'm supposed to put boots on the ground in the very territory that I begged him to move me to. Okay, Lord, you moved me geographically, you moved me. What is your purpose over my life now that I'm back here? What is your plans? What is your purpose over this life you've given me in this moment of time and in this place? How do I need to move? What do I need to do? And I think if we want to have a voice on a global stance, we need to make sure we have a voice of influence in our own homes and in our own neighborhoods. And this is that people are valuing other fields when they should be valuing the one that they're standing in. And that is where we've come into a place of mixture, where we are looking at earthly value and earthly significance and earthly importance instead of heavenly. So it's, what giants are we having to fight to keep them out of this field? But first, before we're even willing to lay down our life and fight giants, we first have to find the value in the field that we are currently in instead of coveting another field. And we can even be guilty of coveting fields that are promised to us in a different season, in a future season. We can aspire and we can dream of that future field, but if we don't see the value of the field that we are in right now, we will never value the one that's promised to us in the future. Because there's something that we are to harvest in the field that we are standing in. There's something valuable in that. There was something valuable about that field that Shammah stood in. And he stood and fought when no one else would. Fear ran everybody else off, but he stood. And these two little verses in the middle of this chapter highlight his stance. And most would see these two little verses about this man named Shammah as insignificant. But it was of such significance that it caught the attention and the eye of the king. That's King David. He became one of David's mighty men. Noteworthy. Battling giants over a seemingly insignificant, invaluable field of lentils. Lentils. A lot of people don't like lentils, right? But there was value that he said, this enemy is not going to come in and take this territory. The enemy, this giant army, is not going to come in and take over this land that I have been given to steward. The enemy is not going to come in and pillage and plunder this field. They don't get to steal from me. They don't get to steal from this land. They don't get to take over this land. So what are we going to do? Are we going to war over this field that we're currently standing in the spirit? Sorry, hate to break it to you. If you haven't woke up yet, we are at war and we will continue to be at war. We are not here to have an easy cakewalk, luxury penthouse life, people. When are we going to stand up and start using our sword in the spirit? Because as soon as we start using our sword in the spirit, we can use the sickle here on this earth. The Lord wants us to reap a massive harvest. And that harvest is going to look like a lot of different things. But we all know what the end game is. That all will confess that Jesus is Lord. Every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, right? Because he sent his only son for all. And I don't know about you and how you are created in your gifting, but I feel that rumbling and that shaking and that groaning. And I'm feeling this acceleration hitting every single thing, right? The enemy is trying to use the acceleration in the spirit for his own plans. I don't give a crap about that. My focus is, what are we as the church, as the bride, as the kingdom of heaven here on this earth what are we doing and how are we going to flow in that acceleration? How are we going to war in the spirit? How are we going to harvest here on this earth? And we can't do that if we're swinging our sword here on this earth. And I think we have seen a lot of people taking detours into lanes they were never called to run in. And we're seeing a lot of messed up and a lot of noise because of that. Because people aren't valuing the lane and the place that God has them in. They're coveting another lane. And so they're just trying to jump over there and trying to do that thing because they don't really want to be where they're at. You know, and I've been guilty of it and I've had to repent. And I just kind of feel like this is that moment. Like if you've known you've done that, even if it's just in your thought process, just take this moment and just say, you know what, Lord, I have done that. I have coveted another field. I've coveted another lane and I've tried to jump over there and I've tried to do this. And I know that's not where I'm called to be, but that's where I want to be. Forgive me, Lord. Open my eyes and help me to see the value of the field, the lane that you have called me to. Help me find my purpose. Help me find my sword in the spirit once again so that I can properly use it. See, I think what fear drove the Israelite army away from, God empowered Shammah to take down. And I can guarantee you, if you were in somebody else's field, one that you're not called to, you won't have the favor or the victory over that enemy. You will feel beat down and pillaged and plundered 24/7. But when you are warring against the enemy and all the principalities of darkness, when you're in the field that you were called to, you don't feel worn down, pillaged, and plundered. You might feel exhausted sometimes, but you feel the favor and you feel the victory. You sense it and you see it, and you can feel that acceleration hitting your life. You see those doors open instead of constantly closed. Now, I've been in plenty of hallway door closed seasons. You know, it's just a season, it's a preparation, right? But that's not what I'm talking about right here. I'm talking about doors that are closed that should be open, but they're closed because you're trying to take a different path into those doors. And they're not going to open until you walk through the right way. And so I feel like a lot of you have had this season of very difficult battles. I'm not saying that Shammah's battle wasn't difficult. It was difficult. He had a whole giant army up against him, but he was still victorious. He didn't get struck down. He didn't get killed. But I feel like some of you have been so beat down that the enemy really has taken over, and it's because you tried to stand in a field you weren't called to stand in. It's okay. This is that pivotal moment where God's redeeming things. And in his redemption is restoration, right? All we got to do is stand up, dust ourselves off, and go, okay, God, show me again because I've forgotten or I've lost my way. Show me again what that field is that you've called me to. Help me to see the value in it so that I can fight for it the way I've tried to fight in this other field. Give me the strength. Restore me, right? Let me step into this pivotal moment where I can be part of this redemption story that you are bringing to the church in this hour. And in that, when he does that with his bride, it then happens here in this earth. So we don't war for things in our nations to bring change. Laws never saved anybody. Jesus did. That's the gospel. Jesus didn't step in to change all the laws, he stepped in to fulfill them. See, the laws of the land don't dictate how we live, the Word of God does. And if we can't stand on the Word of God, how are we going to stand against anything else? His Word, His life giving Word, is our strength. It's our sword, right? His Word is our sword. What's that? Isaiah 49:2 is, I have set my words in your mouth like a double-edged sword, right? And like a polished arrow, I have set you in my quiver. That's one of my life verses. I love that verse. I constantly go back to that because it's a reminder of who he created me to be. It's a reminder to keep standing in the field that he set me in. Because we all fall into the coveting of another field. We've all coveted another field, and we've all tried to go into another field. We've all tried to walk a different way. We've all tried to do other things, but they were not victorious. They were very frustrating. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt to prove it, right? We've all done it, but God's forgiveness and his redemption is there. And I just feel this pivot moment. I mean, we've seen it in our current nation here in the States. It's just this turnabout, right? Like about face. That's the word I'm looking for. About face. It's like this sudden shift. And it's the invitation that God is saying, I know I've called you all, I've chosen you all, but are you choosing to be chosen? Pick up your cross and follow me, right? How are we going to be chosen in this hour to be the hands and the feet of Jesus, to be solutions to the problems of this earth, to be that governing voice, to be that voice of hope and of love, of peace? See, no matter what person's life you step into, no matter what situation you step into, you need to step into it as a solution, not in a way of pride and I know it all and you have to listen to me because I have the solution to your problem. No, it's a journey, and it's a gentle meal with somebody. Maybe they're so tormented by all of the things that's going on that they are just triggered left, right, and center. How can I bring peace to you today? We don't need to talk about the things that are triggering you. If we just need to sit in silence so you can feel the peace of Holy Spirit wash over you, because that's what I carry, then that's how you minister to that person. Most of the time, it's not going to be having these conversations that are all these hot button conversations that are going on right now. Sometimes we have to shift the narrative in our conversation in order to actually shift the narrative. Sometimes it's taking 3 lefts to make 1 right, right? And I think when we begin to see that, then we can begin to war over the giants that are trying to invade the land and the space that we reside in, and we take them out one by one. Yeah. I think that's a big thing right now, is being that place of peace and rest. Like I've shared this story before. I had a doctor's appointment last year, and I'd stepped in. And of course, I hadn't seen this doctor in, a good decade plus, because I had moved out of state. And when I came back to see her, we kind of had an interaction. She knew she recognized me, but she couldn't quite place it because, I mean, it'd been 10 years. And we just kind of interacted very surfacely in the hallway. And then she came into the room to see me, and she sat down and she just asked, "Do you mind if I just sit?" I said, "Of course not. Of course not." And she just kind of did this. She just needed to exhale, and she just sat there. I mean, it felt like 10 minutes, but it was probably only a couple of minutes. And she said, "You sitting in this room is so peaceful." She literally felt the peace when she stepped into the room where I was sitting. And she didn't know it at the time, but I was going through a lot of stuff at that moment of time. I was having a lot of questions for God, feeling like I'm not doing nothing. I don't know what you called me down here to do, all those questions, really feeling insignificant. She didn't know her saying that to me affirmed me of what God called me to do and how he called me to be. I'm getting choked up, sorry. Her response to who I carry is all I needed. I needed that. I don't know. I probably needed it more than she needed to just have a moment to exhale. But when she said that, I was like, okay, I'm not a lost cause. I guess I do have purpose on my life. I mean, we've all had those moments, right? We've also had those moments where we're kind of depressed and stressed and, uncertain of where we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be doing. I was having one of those moments. And I begrudgingly went to the doctor's office because I'm like, I wish I just canceled. I don't feel like going. I just want to sit here in my house all day. But I went ahead and went, and the Lord used me in a moment where I felt very insignificant and very unvalued. I didn't feel like I had much value at that moment. It was just a season I was in, a moment I was in. But he used me to minister to her, and I didn't even say a thing. It was just conversation, and she began to just share with me, you know, trying to get things figured out. I'm looking to retire, doing some other things after I retire. I mean, she just kind of began to exhale and offload. And I just sat and listened. I didn't offer her any wise counsel, or I didn't put on a counselor hat or anything like that. I just let her sit in the peace because that's what she needed. And that's part of that discerning and knowing. I didn't understand that I was using it at that moment. Sometimes it's just a default setting that our spirits have, you know. But after that, appointment, I mean, we eventually went on, took care of the appointment, and then I left. And then I got to the car in the parking lot, and I just began to cry because I'm like, Lord, you used me. Oh my gosh, you used me. You know, we forget how valuable we are because we don't value the field that he has us standing in. Guilty as charged, you know? And so I felt this word so heavily, um, to share because I think it's important, especially, I didn't realize how significant this word was going to be, at least for me, until this week's unfolding. I mean, I was already feeling convicted and and challenged and weighed down with this before everything came out this week. But I think it's even more significant now that we've seen what's going on, that we allow those. I mean, we have those hot buttons for a reason because it's part of the field that we're in, right? But we need to be asking, Lord, okay, I know this is a hot button for me. I know I get riled up with injustice, and I know I get riled up with ignorance, and I know I get riled up with judgment, and I know I get riled up with sickness. I know what gets under my skin. I know what will trigger me. I know I just get these like, and it's like, that's my prayer. I'm like, Lord, I know what hits those buttons for me, but please, God, please let my response be slow and let it be wisdom that comes out of my mouth and not judgment. Let me put on that person's shoes for if only a moment so that I can understand their journey before I respond. I mean, because we are going to have to respond, but our love and our response needs to be covered in love. It needs to be beautifully, lovingly intolerant. We need to remember not what old religious church taught us, but we need to remember to love the person. I am in relationship with a vast array of people, and I love every single one of them. There are a lot of things that a lot of us do not agree on. But what we have done is we've come to a place where, we just agree to disagree on that. You feel, believe this certain way, and I feel and believe this way. It's okay. It doesn't take away from your humanity. It doesn't take away from our friendship. It doesn't take away from anything because I'm going to love those people right where they are. I don't judge them and they don't judge me because I guarantee you there's a lot of things that I have said and done that they're just like, oh my gosh, you know, that's so this, that's so that. I can't believe Amy thinks that or believes that. That's okay. I don't care. Just like they don't care if I think that they're way out there on this, that, or the other. It doesn't take away my love for them. And it more puts me in check with how I respond. Because I do not want my words or my reactions to be a sword. I need it to be a sickle. Let us be sickles on this earth, Lord. I don't want to be a sword on this earth. We aren't to use our swords on this earth. We do not wage war with flesh, but with principalities and powers. We have to keep it in check because there's a lot of division and a vast array of opinions being blasted out there with no consideration of the vast array of life that is on the receiving end of those things. Now, I'm not saying don't speak truth. Please don't hear me wrong on that. Truth needs to be spoken in the right time, right temperature, right attitude, right time, right place. If God's going to have you speak truth, he's going to have you speak it at the right moment in his perfect timing. And I will just say that truth will offend. When his truth hit my life, it was very offensive, right? It triggered me. It made me upset. I didn't agree with it, right? But some of that truth, although it was his truth, some of that truth way back when was not being spoken to me cloaked and covered in his love. It was very much that sword of judgment that was, I was being stabbed with. It was lucky that, I kind of had an attitude and I had a thick skin. So it didn't deter me from the path that I was on, but I saw it for what it was. And so that's why I say, Lord, I don't want to be a sword on this earth. I mean, I know I'm a sword. He's told me I'm a sword. He's told me I'm an arrow. I know that. I know we are weapons of mass destruction, but we are weapons of mass destruction in the spirit, not on earth. And when we figure out the difference, our responses are different. In every situation that we step into, there's going to be a right response or a wrong response. And, and if it's going to be speaking truth, then it's speaking truth. But if you've already asked the Lord, Lord, let my response not be a quick trigger, but a slow response, then it's going to be the right response in that moment of time that will bring that healing, that will bring about a conversation, that will bring about that beautifully intolerant journeying of life together relationship. Okay. I'm so fed up with the sword of cancel culture that I think has been more rampant in the church than in the earth. I mean, it's everywhere, but because of where I'm at, I see it more in the church, and it just turns my stomach. I'm struggling with the rhetoric that's going on out there. I'm going to kind of go on this soapbox for just a moment, and then I'll close this out because I don't want to keep you too much longer. Is this demand that all leaders say something about the current environment um, here in this nation. Now, I do believe that there are offices and um, leaders that should say something, but I think the demand that's being put on them, they are demanding that that leader mimic and parrot what they think that leader should mimic and parrot. Every leader is called to a specific field. Now, if that leader has been on the bandwagon of all other social justice issues, then they should say something about this social issue. Okay. I just think that we need to be a different sound than what we're hearing right now. I think we need to be more in a quiet fruit inspection instead of a loud judge and jury. That's a very broad blanket statement, and I'm not going to take the time to break it all down, and I apologize for that. But I think if we really weigh our words, then we will weigh everything that we say. We will weigh every situation that we step into, and we will discern if we're supposed to speak or if we're supposed to listen. And I just think that we need to allow God to remove the man-made stages and everything that man has built, especially within the church. If we just allow God to do what God's going to do in the shaking and the rattling and the rumbling, we don't need to be out there cutting people down and joining arms with cancel culture. I do think that ones that should be weighing in on things that are not, I think it's evident. Okay, so why are you listening to them still? If they aren't, and you know that they should be, walk away. Right? God is going to show you how he wants you to handle each and everything, and he's going to handle his church. I just think that every situation is different, and we can't be judgy, but we do need to inspect the fruit. Right? When you mature, if the fruit has not, it begins to rot. Right? And I think we're going to see the very black and white of things as we begin to continue to journey forward. But we need to be responsible, more responsible for ourselves and the field that we're standing in, and what the Lord is setting our sights on in this hour, in order to partner with him in this pivotal moment, to be a part of that redemption and that restoration that he is bringing to us individually, us as a church, as his remnant, and then in turn to the nations. See, we put everything up here above. We've had it, the priority list has been out of whack. Because if we want to see revival, you've heard me say this before, we have to see the reviving in us first. And when we, on an individual basis, are revived, then the church corporately can be revived and restored, renewed, purified, right? And then we can have that governing voice that actually brings influence to things of this earth. But we have to do it here first. And we can't look, sound, and behave like the rest of the world. We cannot be swinging our swords at everybody we disagree with. You know, it grieved me to see people. If you don't agree with me, unfriend me now. Come on. Come on. Not cool. Okay. I'm going to leave it at that. I know I just opened a whole box of worms and I shouldn't have done that. So I apologize. Maybe we'll come back and do a part 2 and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think it was just, I did feel it was important to say as part of that challenge and that sharpening that God's called us into right now, to understand and differentiate between the sword in our hand and the sickle in our hand, and which one we're supposed to use where. And that very broad blanket statement needed to be a part of that, taking it to the Lord, talking to him about it. How do I need to walk forward? This particular person that I'm seeing this over, how do you want me to pray, Lord? How do I need to pray for this situation? How do I need to pray for this person? How do I need to intercede over the situation? We are not in a place of prayer. Our words will mess up everything. But when we step into intercession in the Spirit, we pray, intercede the perfect will of the Father. So Lord, help me to step into a place of intercession over this place that is grieving me, over this conversation or lack thereof that's grieving me. Help me to step into a place of a pure intercession where I'm not motivated by earthly things or my emotions. My intercession is motivated by things of the Spirit. So how do we step into intercede over current leaders of the church that may or may not be saying the things that they should or should not be saying? Okay. How do we become a sword in the Spirit? Intercession. How do we become a sickle on this earth? A reaping, a gathering, harvest. Okay. I'm going to let that go. I've gone like 10 minutes over. So thank you for hanging with me. I'll go back through. I missed a lot of the comments. I apologize. But thank you so much for hopping on and being a part of this conversation and giving ear to what the Lord is saying. And I'm thankful that those of you that are listening understand to take this to the Lord and ask him how he wants you to stand in your field, how to war, how to gather, understanding and reopening our eyes to see the value of where we're currently at and not coveting things of future seasons or coveting others' fields. All right. Love you dearly. Thank you so much for your time. And I will be on tonight with Lisa Perna and Debbie Kitterman. So that's going to be fun. So that'll be a nice conversation tonight. I'm sure part of today's broadcast will kind of get pulled into that because we're talking about Here Comes the Bride, and how are we right now in this moment of time getting the bride ready to walk down the aisle? What does that look like? So that's going to be a fun, full conversation. So make sure you hop on tonight, same channels, and it will be at 9:00 Eastern time tonight. All right. Love you guys. And I will see you at, I don't know, 9 hours from now. All right. Love